talks about Carl Jung's Red Book as if it's this mythical object, and honestly, it kind of is. And I'll tell you why later. But what most people don't realise is just how enormous it is, or what is actually inside it. I knew it was large. I knew it had Jung's artwork in it from his time engaged in intense active imaginations. And I knew it had the English translation as well as the original German text. But I hadn't actually seen a photograph of the English text. I bought this beautiful facsimile thinking I'd dip into Jung's original active imaginations, and instead I'm sending it back. Why? Keep watching and I'll show you. I wanted this book because my Psychimagination series is in many ways my own version of what Jung was doing in his Red Book, recording active imaginations, dialogues with inner figures and symbolic journeys that shape my psychological and spiritual life. Jung's Red Book is like the original template for that kind of work. And he references this book a lot in his books on psychology. So I thought, perfect, I'll read his imaginal journeys and see what the master saw in his unconscious mind. But let's talk about what the Red Book actually is, because it's one of the most important psychological documents in the 20th century. Between 1913 and 1917, Jung went through what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. He wasn't having a breakdown, he was deliberately entering the imaginal realm, using what we now call active imagination. He recorded everything: visions, dialogues, symbolic encounters, mythic scenes. These weren't metaphors. For Jung, they were living experiences, just as the experiences that I've documented in my Psychimagination books are living experiences for me. The only thing is that my books have got ways for you to undertake the same kind of journeys. But back to Jung. He wrote his records first in notebooks, called the Black Books. He then rewrote and illustrated them in a large red leather volume. And this was his private record of the inner world that became the foundation for all his later theories. This period was the prima materia of Jung's entire psychology, the chaotic raw material from which everything else emerged. He wrote about abandoning the spirit of this time, the rational utilitarian mindset, which we still have, and turning towards the spirit of the depths, the living, chaotic, creative force of the unconscious, something that really resonates with me. He wrote about abandoning the spirit of this time, the rational, utilitarian mindset, which we still have, and turning towards the spirit of the depth, the living, chaotic, creative force of the unconscious. Jung described being flooded by a numinous, overwhelming stream of imagery that threatened to break him, but it ultimately became the foundation for his life's work. Later, he said that everything he wrote afterward, all the theories, all the books, was simply the outer classification and scientific elaboration of what he experienced during these years. He never published the Red Book in his lifetime. He referenced these experiences indirectly in his later works, the archetypes, the collective unconscious individuation. But the source material stayed hidden. After Jung's death in 1961, his family treated it with immense secrecy and caution, keeping it under lock and key in a Swiss. After Jung's death in 1961, his family treated it with immense secrecy and caution, keeping it under lock and key in a Swiss bank vault, with access restricted to a very small number of individuals trusted by the estate. They treated the Red Book as a private, intimate and somewhat dangerous legacy, fearing it would be misunderstood as a sign of insanity. It wasn't until October 2009 that the book was finally published. And what we have today is a meticulous facsimile of the original. The handwriting, the paintings, the illuminated pages, everything. It's stunning. It's also huge, heavy, and the text is, as Jung wrote it, in tiny Gothic script. Beautiful, but not exactly friendly to the eyes. And of course, the Gothic script is in German, which is how it should be as a replica of what is essentially a work of art. But I think it's important that you should know this in case you're thinking of getting a copy. There is an English translation, however, after the replica of the original. And when I opened it, well, I was both delighted and, well, let me show you. So this is one of the pages, his artworks. So it's beautiful, it's absolutely exquisite. As I say, it is an artwork. There's one of his paintings, and then there are this kind of thing. So beautiful colour plates, and thick pages. So it really is quite extraordinary. So all of this is delightful, absolutely delightful. But I paid over $300, $350 approximately Australian dollars for this. So I did want to actually be able to read it as well as enjoy the sheer artistry of it. Right? So gorgeous, right? Now, here is the English translation at the back. I don't know if you can see that, but I find it very hard to see that. Yes, the English text inside is so tiny, it's almost impossible to read. So, as much as I wanted to read this version, I simply can't. The writing is too small for me to comfortably engage with. And this isn't a book you skim, it's a book you sit with. So I'll be returning this and reading the Reader's Edition on ebook instead. That version has all the text, none of the artwork, but it will be readable because on an e-reader I can set the size to what is comfortable for me. I want to read it because back when I first read Jung as a teenager and heard mentions of the Red Book, it sounded fascinating. But it hadn't been published back then. Now it has. And I'm further motivated to read it because my psychimagination books come from the same impulse to record the imaginal encounters that shape my inner life. They're not imitations of Jung, obviously, but they're part of the same lineage, using imagination as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious and letting symbolic figures speak in their own language. So even though I can't actually read this beautiful edition because of the tiny English script in it, I'm still going to study the text, just in a format that doesn't require a magnifying glass. If you're curious about Jung's inner world or about active imagination in general, the Reader's Edition is a practical way to go, so long as you don't expect it to include the images, because it doesn't. And if you want to see how this kind of imaginal work looks in a contemporary accessible form, then my psychimagination books are essentially my own red book, just written in modern language, with guidance for anyone who wants to explore their own psyche safely. Thanks for watching, and if you've ever tried to read this giant thing yourself, let me know how you went. Links to my books are, of course, in the description. Oh, and, like, share, all of that kind of stuff. It'll help me a great deal.